The rain came down in sheets that night, cold and unforgiving, turning the marble courtyard into a mirror of black water. And there, in the middle of it all, stood a man who made grown men tremble, Minjai Ryu, head of the Beko syndicate, draping his coat over the shoulders of a woman the world had forgotten. Her name was Kioma Ease, and she was shaking. Not from the cold, not entirely, but from the impossible reality that Korea Aksh's most feared mafia boss was kneeling beside her in the rain, his dark eyes fixed on hers like she was the only person in the world. "I thought I was invisible to him," she would later whisper to herself in the dark, "until the night he knelt beside me in the rain." Because men like Minjai didn't kneel, they didn't offer mercy, they certainly didn't notice the help. They said he once had a man killed for looking at him wrong during a meeting, that his silence was more terrifying than his anger, that he built his empire on calculated cruelty and never looked back. So why was Korea's most feared mafia boss protecting a black maid who had been eating stale bread in the servants' quarters? But here is the thing about kindness in a world built on blood: it doesn't go unnoticed. And that one act of mercy, it painted a target on her back that neither of them saw coming. The most powerful man in Seoul just gave his coat to a woman everyone else treated like dirt. Let that sink in for a moment. Have you ever been so invisible that one act of kindness felt like a miracle? Like the universe finally remembered you existed? That's what it was for Kioma, a miracle wrapped in danger. Because in a world where mercy is weakness, his enemies were already sharpening their knives. And they were watching. Always watching. So what happens when the coldest heart in Korea starts to thaw for the wrong person? What happens when love blooms in the shadow of violence, and the man who saved you is the same man who trapped you? Before I tell you how it all unravelled, how blood was spilled, hearts were broken, and impossible choices were made, hit that subscribe button and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Seoul never slept. Beneath the glittering neon signs of Gangnam, past the luxury penthouses where politicians sipped whiskey with criminals, the city pulsed with a hidden heartbeat. A rhythm of power, money, and fear. And at the centre of that heartbeat was Min Jae-ryu. 32 years old, self-made, untouchable. He was the head of the Beko syndicate, the White Tiger, a name whispered in back alleys and boardrooms alike. Loan sharks, real estate, underground gambling, government contracts that never saw the light of day. If it made money in Seoul's shadows, Min Jae controlled it, but he wasn't born into power, no silver spoon, no family legacy, just an orphan who clawed his way out of a state-run children's home with nothing but hunger and rage. They said his stare could freeze blood, that he built his throne on the bones of those who doubted him. That mercy was a language he'd never learned. And maybe that was true. His mansion sat on a hill overlooking the Han River, all cold marble and bulletproof glass. Inside, the staff moved like ghosts, silent, efficient, invisible. They knew the rules: don't speak unless spoken to, don't ask questions, and never look the boss in the eye. The floors gleamed, the chandeliers sparkled, everything pristine. But beneath the beauty was a darkness you could feel in your chest. A weight. The kind of place where people disappeared and no one dared ask why. Min Jae preferred it that way. Control through fear, distance through silence. He trusted no one, loved nothing, expected betrayal because that's all he'd ever known. Until her. Until the night he saw Kioma Ease kneeling in the rain, clutching a piece of stale bread like it was gold, her thin jacket soaked through, her lips trembling, but her eyes still had fight in them. And something inside him, something he thought he'd buried 15 years ago, cracked. Her name was Kioma Ease, and she wasn't supposed to be there, 25 years old, a nursing graduate from Lagos with a smile that could light up a room and dreams bigger than the small apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother. She'd spent 4 years studying, working night shifts at a local clinic, saving every naira she could. Because Kioma believed in something dangerous. Hope. Hope that life could be better, that hard work mattered, that somewhere out there, opportunity was waiting. So when the email arrived, Clean logo, professional language, promising a nursing position at a private hospital in Seoul, with housing included and a salary that made her heart race. She didn't hesitate. She told her mother, "I'm going to change our lives." She boarded that plane with nothing but a suitcase, her nursing certificate, and a future she could almost taste. But the moment she landed at Incheon Airport, everything unravelled. The man holding the sign with her name wore a suit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Welcome to Korea, Miss Ease. Let me take your passport for processing." She handed it over, trusting, naive. That was the last time she ever held it. Within an hour, she was in the back of a van with tinted windows. No hospital, no nursing job, just a recruiter who worked for people who traded in desperation and a contract she didn't understand written in Korean. "You owe us now," he said in broken English. "Flight, visa, processing fees. You work until debt is paid." She tried to argue, tried to run. But where do you run in a country where you don't speak the language, don't know the streets, and your passport is locked in someone else's safe? So Kioma Ise, nursing graduate, daughter, sister, dreamer, became a maid in the house of a man she'd never met, a man named Min Jae-ryu. Her reality became this: 16-hour days on her feet, scrubbing floors that already gleamed, polishing glass that never had fingerprints, washing sheets for beds she'd never sleep in. The servants' quarters were a converted storage room in the back of the estate. Concrete floor, a thin mattress, a single bulb that flickered when the wind blew. She ate scraps, whatever the kitchen staff didn't want. Cold rice, leftover soup, bruised fruit. But every month, without fail, she wired half of what little she earned back home to her mother. She lied in her messages, told her the hospital was beautiful, that Korea was kind, that she was saving money and would visit soon. Because if her mother knew the truth, that her daughter was trapped, working for criminals, losing weight she didn't have to lose, it would kill her. And Kioma refused to let that happen. But here's what you need to understand about Kioma Ise. She never begged. Not once. Not when the head maid screamed at her for folding towels wrong. Not when her hands bled from scrubbing without gloves. Not when she went 2 days without eating because the kitchen forgot to leave her anything. She never cried in front of them. She saved her tears for the nights when the rain was loud enough to hide them. Because crying meant breaking. And breaking meant disappearing. And the other maids. They made sure she knew what happened to people who broke. There were 5 other women working in the Ryu mansion, all of them Korean, all of them older. They spoke in quick whispers and avoided her eyes. One night, a woman named Mrs. Kang, grey-haired, kind-faced, pulled Kioma aside after dinner. "Listen to me carefully," she whispered in halting English. "In this house, you do not exist. You do your work. You keep your head down. You do not ask questions. And you never, never let him notice you." "Him?" Kioma asked. Mrs. Kang's face went pale. "The master, Mr. Ryu, the ones who get noticed." She trailed off, shaking her head. "They don't stay long." "What happens to them?" Mrs. Kang looked away. "I don't know, and I don't ask." That was the last real conversation Kioma had with anyone for 3 months. Her days became a rhythm, a heartbeat of survival. Wake at 5 a.m, polish the marble floors in the main hall, dust the library no one used, wipe down the windows in the east wing, prepare the linens, serve tea if summoned, stay invisible. And Min-jae? He walked past the staff like they were furniture. Not cruel, not unkind. Just absent. She'd see him sometimes in the mornings, coming down the grand staircase in tailored suits, his expression unreadable, his movements precise. He never looked at her, never acknowledged her existence, which was fine, safer that way. But the mansion had its own language, its own warnings. There were rooms in the basement that stayed locked, deliveries that came at 3 a.m, men in dark suits who arrived without knocking and left without speaking. Once, Kioma saw blood on the marble floor near the side entrance. She scrubbed it clean without asking questions, hands shaking, stomach twisting. The head maid, a sharp-eyed woman named Ms. Choi, watched her like a hawk. "You work slow," she'd snap in Korean, even though Kioma didn't understand. But Kioma learned the tone, learned to move faster, apologize with her eyes, disappear into the walls. And when the work was unbearable, when her body screamed and her heart ached for home, she had one small rebellion. She hummed. Softly. Under her breath. Nigerian songs her mother used to sing, Igbo lullabies, anything that reminded her she was still her, and she saved half her food. Every single meal, no matter how small, she tore in half, ate one portion, wrapped the other in a napkin, and tucked it into her pocket. Not because she wasn't hungry, she was always hungry, but because saving something, anything, made her feel like she still had control, like she was still preparing, still surviving, still human. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that someone was watching. Min Jae-ryun noticed everything. The way she moved through the mansion like a shadow, the way she never complained, the way she hummed when she thought no one was listening. He saw her wrap that food, saw the care she took, saw the quiet dignity in her exhaustion. And it reminded him of a boy who used to steal bread from the orphanage kitchen and hide it under his mattress, who learned young that hunger wasn't the worst thing, losing yourself was. Kioma didn't he know that her quiet survival had caught the attention of a man who noticed everything. A man who was about to make a choice that would change both their lives forever, and seal their fates in blood, rain, and impossible love. It was past midnight when the convoy pulled through the gates. 3 black cars, engines purring like predators, headlights cutting through sheets of rain that hammered the compound like bullets. The kind of rain that swallowed sound. That made the world feel like it was ending. Min Jae sat in the back of the lead car, staring out the window with dead eyes. The meeting in Busan had gone exactly as planned, which meant someone didn't walk out. There was blood on his cufflinks. He hadn't bothered wiping it off. His driver, a man named Sung-ho who'd worked for him for 8 years and knew when to speak and when to stay silent, pulled up to the main entrance and cut the engine. "Sir, we're here." Min Jae didn't move. Because through the rain-streaked window, he saw something that made him forget about Busan, about the blood, about everything. A figure. Small, crouched by the servants' quarters like a wounded animal. At first he thought it was a dog, some stray that wandered onto the property. But then she moved, and he saw her face. Kioma. She was drenched, completely soaked through. Her thin jacket, too light for this weather, too worn to protect her from anything, clung to her frame like a second skin. Her hair, usually tied back, hung in wet ropes around her face, and in her hands, trembling from cold, she held a piece of bread. Not fresh bread, not even day-old bread. Stale, hard, the kind the kitchen threw out. Min Jae watched, frozen, as she lifted it to her mouth and bit down, chewed slowly, carefully, like it was the only thing keeping her alive. And then, God, then she did something that made his chest tighten in a way he didn't recognize. She tore the bread in half, ate one piece, and wrapped the other in a napkin, folding it with the same care someone might fold a love letter, tucked it into her pocket, saving it. "Sir?" Sung-ho's voice cut through the silence. "That's the maid, the one from Nigeria." Min Jae's jaw clenched. "I know who she is. She refused the kitchen leftovers today. Ms. Choi said she was being difficult." He didn't respond. Couldn't. Because something about her, the pride in her hunger, the dignity in her silence, it was a mirror he didn't want to look into, a mirror that reflected a version of himself he'd buried 15 years ago. The orphanage. He was 8 years old, rail-thin, with bruises on his ribs and a hunger that never stopped gnawing. The older kids took his food. The staff didn't care. So he learned to steal, learned to hide bread under his mattress, wrapped in newspaper, saving it for the nights when the pain in his stomach made him cry. He remembered the shame of it, the way hunger made you small, made you invisible, but he also remembered the vow he made to himself in that cold, dark room. I will never beg. I will never break. And I will never let anyone make me feel this way again. He'd kept that promise, clawed his way out, built an empire, became untouchable. But standing there in the rain, watching this woman who had every reason to break, who should have broken, still holding onto her dignity like it was the last thing she owned. He felt something crack inside. Something he thought he'd killed a long time ago. Sung-ho shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, should I—" "No." Min-jae opened the door himself, stepped out into the rain, no umbrella, no hesitation. He'd spent 15 years becoming untouchable, building walls so high no one could see the boy he used to be. But in that moment, standing in the rain watching a woman who refused to break, who still saved half her bread like tomorrow might be better, he couldn't walk away. And what he did next, nobody, not his enemies, not even his own men, saw it coming. Keep watching. Chioma didn't hear him approach. The rain was too loud, her thoughts too heavy. She was thinking about home, about her mother's last message asking if she was eating well, about the lie she'd sent back. "Yes, Mama." Every day. She was thinking about how much longer she could survive this, how much longer before she disappeared like the others. And then a shadow fell over her. She looked up, and her heart stopped. Min-jae Ryu, standing over her, soaked. His dark eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. The bread slipped from her fingers, hit the wet ground. She scrambled to her knees immediately, head down, hands shaking. Because that's what you did. That's what kept you alive. "I'm sorry," she whispered in English, voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll go inside. I'll get up." His voice was low, rough, like it hadn't been used to speak kindly in years. Maybe it hadn't. She obeyed, rising on trembling legs, eyes still down, waiting for the blow, the reprimand, the order to pack her things, but it never came. Instead, she felt warmth. Min-jae removed his coat, expensive, black, still carrying the heat of his body, and draped it over her shoulders. The weight of it nearly broke her. "From now on," he said, each word deliberate, controlled, "you eat inside, with the staff, in the kitchen." Chioma couldn't speak, couldn't process what was happening. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the blood on his cufflinks, close enough to feel the danger radiating off him. But his voice, when he spoke again, wasn't cruel. It was a promise. "Anyone who laughs at you, anyone who turns you away, anyone who makes you feel less than human." He paused. "Will not work here tomorrow." Her eyes finally lifted, met his. And for the first time in 3 months, she saw something in another person's face that she thought she'd never see again. Recognition. Like he saw her. Really saw her. Not as a maid, not as a foreigner, not as someone beneath him, as a person. He didn't wait for a response. Just turned and walked toward the mansion, rain streaming down his back, leaving her standing there in his coat, shaking for entirely different reasons now. Chioma stood frozen for a long time after he disappeared inside. Then slowly, she pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders and buried her face in the fabric. It smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, something she couldn't name, and for the first time since landing in Korea, she let herself cry. Not from despair, from something more dangerous. Hope. But in the shadows near the east wing, 2 men watched the entire exchange. Lieutenant Park Jae-sung, Min-jae's head of security, and Lieutenant Kwon Tae-min, his financial advisor, both of them loyal for over a decade, both of them calculating, cold, and both of them very uncomfortable with what they just witnessed. "Did you see that?" Kwon whispered. Park's expression was stone. "The boss just gave his coat to the help." "It's more than that." He noticed her, spoke to her, protected her. A pause, heavy, dangerous. "That's weakness," Park said quietly. "Or distraction," Kwon added. "Either way." They didn't finish the sentence. They didn't have to. Because in their world, weakness was blood in the water, and sharks were already circling. Inside the mansion, Min-jae stood alone in his study, staring at his reflection in the dark window. His coat was gone, his cufflinks still stained, and for the first time in 15 years, he felt something he swore he'd never feel again: vulnerability. He poured himself a drink, downed it, poured another, but no amount of whiskey could erase the image of her kneeling in the rain, saving half her bread, refusing to break. "What the hell are you doing?" he muttered to himself. But he already knew the answer. He was making the same mistake every powerful man before him had made. He was starting to care. And in his world, caring got you killed. 3 days. That's how long it took for the mansion to turn poisonous. Word spread like wildfire through the staff quarters, whispered in dark corners and behind closed doors. The boss showed interest in the maid. Not just any maid. Her. The foreign one. The black girl who didn't belong. And in a house built on hierarchy, control, and silence, that single act of kindness became a declaration of war. The whispers started first. "She's a spy," one of the kitchen staff hissed. "Planted by the Kim family, using her innocence to get close to him." "I heard she seduced him," another said. "Women like that, they know how to manipulate powerful men. She's dangerous, mark my words, she'll destroy everything." Kioma heard none of it directly, but she felt the shift. The way the other maids suddenly refused to look at her, the way conversation stopped when she entered a room, the way her workspace was always the dirtiest, her tasks always the hardest. But she kept her head down, did her work, stayed invisible, until the threats began. The first one appeared on her mattress. A dead rat, throat slit, blood soaking into the thin fabric. Kioma stared at it, bile rising in her throat, hands shaking. She cleaned it herself, threw it in the garbage outside. Told no one. "It's just intimidation," she told herself, "just a warning." But 2 days later, she returned to her room to find the photograph of her family, the only one she had, kept tucked under her pillow, shattered on the floor. Glass everywhere. Her mother's face scratched out. That night she didn't sleep. Then the food started making her sick. Not enough to kill, just enough to weaken. To remind her that she was powerless. She stopped eating in the kitchen. Started skipping meals altogether. And through it all, there was only one person who showed her kindness. Mrs. Kang, the older woman who'd warned her on her first week, who sometimes left extra rice outside her door, who would catch her eye across the hall and give her the smallest, saddest smile, like she understood, like she'd seen this before. But one morning, Mrs. Kang didn't show up for work. Her station in the laundry room was empty, her belongings gone. Kioma's stomach dropped. She found Ms. Choi, the head maid, in the hallway, grabbed her arm before she could think better of it. "Where is she?" Kioma demanded, voice shaking. "Where's Mrs. Kang?" Ms. Choi yanked her arm free, eyes cold as winter. "She talked too much," she said simply. "She's gone, and if you're smart, you'll remember that." The message was clear. Showing vulnerability here means death. Meanwhile, Min-jae felt the shift too. His men, lieutenants who'd served him for years, suddenly avoided eye contact during meetings. Responses came slower. Tensions ran higher. Park Jae-sung, his head of security, questioned his decisions for the first time in a decade. Kwon Tae-min started CCing others on emails that used to go directly to Min-jae. Small things, subtle things. But Min-jae didn't get to where he was by ignoring small things. Something was wrong. And he had a sinking feeling he knew what, or who, it was about. He found her late one night on her knees in the kitchen, scrubbing. The floor gleamed, spotless, but she kept scrubbing, hands moving in frantic circles. That's when he saw it. Blood, diluted in the water, smeared on the tile, dripping from her hand. "Kioma." She flinched, spun around, face pale. "Mr. Ryu, I'm sorry, I didn't know you'd be—" "Your hand." She hid it behind her back immediately. "It's nothing, just a cut. I broke a glass earlier and—" "Show me." It wasn't a request. Slowly she brought her hand forward. The cut was deep, angry, wrapped in a kitchen towel that was soaked through. "Glass," she repeated, her voice hollow. Min-jae stared at her, at the poorly wrapped wound, at the fear in her eyes, at the way she held herself like she was bracing for a blow, and he knew. She was lying. Comment below if you think she should tell him the truth or stay silent, because what happens next will break your heart. Min-jae didn't say a word. He just turned and walked toward his private study. Kioma stood frozen, unsure if she was supposed to follow, terrified of what would happen if she did. Then his voice cut through the silence. "Come with me. Now." She obeyed. The study door closed behind them with a finality that made her chest tighten. Min-jae locked it. The sound of the bolt sliding into place echoed in the quiet room. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her knees weak. Not anger, not rage. Something worse. Control barely held together. "Who hurt you?" Not what happened. Not "are you okay?" Who hurt you? It was a command, a demand. The voice of a man who'd built an empire on getting answers. Kioma's breath hitched. "No one. I told you I broke a—" "Don't." His voice dropped to something dangerous. "Don't lie to me. Not you." And something about the way he said it, "not you," like she was different, like she mattered, shattered the walls she'd built around herself. It all came pouring out. The dead rat, the shattered photograph, the poisoned food, Mrs. Kang's disappearance, the whispers, the threats, the isolation. "They think I'm using you," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "They think I'm dangerous, and maybe they're right. Maybe I should just stop." Min-jae's hands were shaking. Actually shaking. She'd never seen him lose composure, not once. But now his jaw was clenched so tight she thought it might crack, his breathing shallow, eyes burning with something that terrified her. "Stay here tonight," he said quietly. Too quietly. "Lock this door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "What are you going to—" "Lock the door." He was already moving toward the exit. "Min-jae!" He stopped, turned, and for just a moment his expression softened. "No one touches you again," he said. "I promise." Then he was gone. What happened next was never spoken about, not directly, but the evidence was everywhere. 3 of Min-jae's most trusted lieutenants didn't show up to the morning meeting: Park Jae-sung, Kwon Tae-min, and Lee Dong-hyun, the mansion's security coordinator. Their offices were cleared out by noon, desks empty, files gone, no explanation given. By evening, their families, wives, children, elderly parents, received identical envelopes. Cash, enough to start over somewhere far away, and one-way tickets out of Seoul. The message was clear: leave, now, and never come back. Ms. Choi, the head maid, was called into Min-jae's office at 6 a.m. She emerged 20 minutes later, face ashen, hands trembling. She walked straight to Kioma's room, knocked softly. When Kioma opened the door, Ms. Choi bowed, deep, respectful. "I apologize," she said in halting English, "for everything. It won't happen again." Then she was gone. By the end of the week, the entire mansion understood. Kioma Ease was untouchable. Not because she asked to be, but because the most dangerous man in Seoul had decided she was. But the victory felt hollow. Because that night, when Kioma returned to her room, now clean, her belongings untouched, fresh linens on her bed, she sat down and cried. Not from relief, from something far more complicated. She was safe now, protected. But at what cost? How many people had disappeared because of her? How much blood was on her hands simply because she existed in the wrong place? And the most terrifying question of all, what happens when the man protecting you is also the monster everyone fears? She fell asleep in Min-jae's coat, which she still hadn't returned, and for the first time since arriving in Korea, she dreamed of something other than escape. She dreamed of him. The weeks that followed were the strangest of Kioma's life, because slowly, impossibly, the mansion stopped feeling like a prison. It started small. Minjae began taking his morning tea in the sunroom instead of his office, and somehow, Kioma was always the one assigned to serve it. At first, they didn't speak, just existed in the same space, him reading reports, her pouring tea with steady hands. But then one morning he asked her a question. "What does your name mean?" She blinked, surprised. "Kioma. It means God is good." He considered that. Nodded slowly. "And do you still believe that?" She met his eyes. Some days. Something shifted after that. The conversations grew longer, deeper. She taught him Igbo words, Ne for mother, Obi for heart, Udo for peace. He stumbled over the pronunciation and she laughed, a real laugh, the kind that lit up her whole face. And Minjae, for the first time in 15 years, laughed too. Not the cold, calculated smile he used in meetings, but something genuine, unguarded, human. He told her about the orphanage, about the boy who stole bread and vowed never to be weak again. She told him about Lagos, about her mother's hands, worn from work but always gentle, about her brother who wanted to be a doctor. "I was supposed to help them," she whispered one morning. "That's why I came here. And instead—" "You're still helping them," Minjae said quietly. "You're surviving. That's more than most people could do." Their hands were close on the table, almost touching. Neither of them moved, but the air between them hummed with something neither dared name. Then the file arrived. It was a routine background check, something Minjae ordered every 6 months on all household staff. Standard protocol. He opened Kioma's file without thinking twice, and his world stopped. Employment history. Recruited by Hanseong International Staffing Agency. Owner. Choi Woo-jin. Minjae's blood ran cold. Choi Woo-jin. A name he hadn't thought about in years, a subsidiary operation he'd inherited when he absorbed a rival's assets 5 years ago, a business he'd barely glanced at because it was clean on paper. Legitimate employment, international placements, nothing illegal, except it wasn't clean. It was trafficking dressed in business casual, and Minjae owned it. His hands shook as he flipped through the rest of the file. Recruitment details, confiscated passport, debt bondage contract, the fabricated nursing job that never existed. Every word was a knife to the chest. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be free. And he was the reason she wasn't. The monster she'd been running from had been protecting her all along. He sat in his office until the sun set, staring at that file. Hands clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. Then he stood, walked to her room, knocked once. She opened the door, smiling, actually smiling until she saw his face. "Minjae, what's wrong?" He stepped inside, closed the door, and told her everything. Kioma listened in silence. Her expression didn't change, but her hands started trembling. When he finished, the quiet was unbearable. "Say something," he whispered. "Please." She looked up at him, and her eyes were full of something worse than anger. Heartbreak. "So all of this," she said slowly. "The kindness, the protection, the tea in the mornings. It was guilt." "No." His voice cracked, broke. "It started as guilt, but that's not what this is anymore." "Then what is it?" He stepped closer, close enough to see the unshed tears in her eyes. "It's everything," he said. "You're everything I didn't know I was missing. And Then let me go." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Minjae stared at her, shattered. "What?" "If you care about me," Kioma whispered, tears finally falling. "If any of this was real, then give me the choice you took away. Let me go." His hands shook, his breathing shallow, because he could do a lot of things. Bury bodies, destroy empires, break men with a single word. But letting her go, that might actually kill him. But he did it anyway. 1 week later, Kioma stood at Incheon Airport with a new passport in her name, a bank account with enough money to start over, and a plane ticket to Lagos. all of it arranged by Minjae. He didn't come to say goodbye. Couldn't, because if he saw her one more time, he'd beg her to stay, and she deserved better than a monster's desperation. Chioma stood at the gate, boarding pass trembling in her hand. Around her, families reunited. Travellers rushed past. Life continued like her world wasn't ending. She thought about the mansion, the rain, his coat around her shoulders, the way he laughed when she taught him obi. "I thought love was supposed to feel like safety," she whispered to herself. "But sometimes, love feels like letting go." She looked back one more time. He wasn't there, but somehow she knew he was watching. "I learned that mercy isn't about power," she thought as she boarded the plane. "It's about seeing someone when the world wants them invisible, and sometimes the cruelest kindness is giving someone the choice you never had." The plane took off, and Chioma closed her eyes, holding on to the memory of a man who became human because of her, even if it destroyed them both. Back in Seoul, Minjae sat alone in his study. The mansion was silent, empty, exactly how it had been before. But now the silence screamed. On his desk, folded carefully, was the napkin Chioma used to wrap her bread that first night. He'd kept it, still carried it. A reminder that once, just once, he'd chosen to be more than the monster everyone feared, even if it cost him the only thing he'd ever loved. So, do you think she stayed? Or did she leave? Maybe that's not the right question. Maybe the real question is, would you have forgiven him? Could love survive that kind of truth? Comment your thoughts below. I want to know, would you choose freedom or would you choose love? Can someone be both your salvation and your cage? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that'll make you feel everything. Stories about broken people, impossible choices, and the messy, complicated truth about what it means to be human. And remember this, the people who show you kindness in your darkest hour, they're not always saints. Sometimes they're just broken people trying to be better, trying to rewrite the story they were given. Sometimes love isn't a fairy tale. Sometimes it's two people standing in the rain, offering each other the only thing they have left, a choice. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.